Imagine a world where sunlight never arrives, where sound drifts for hundreds of miles as if searching for someone, anyone, to listen, and where creatures glow, stretch, warp, and thrive in ways that make biology look like it's improvising. A world where pressure could crush steel, yet delicate fish glide through it like it's nothing. Where towers of boiling minerals rise from the darkness, feeding ecosystems that live without a single drop of sunlight. Where trenches plunge so deep they could swallow mountains whole, and still have room for mysteries we've only glimpsed once. That world is not on another planet. It is right beneath your feet. Tonight, we're diving into the ocean's darkest zones, a realm of silence, shadows, impossible survival, and the kind of bizarre discoveries that make you question how much of Earth you actually know. From glowing predators and transparent-headed wanderers, to chemical-powered life and unexplained sounds echoing through miles of black water, this journey will take you through a universe hidden inside our own. So take a breath. The deeper we go, the stranger it gets. And by the time we reach the bottom, you might never look at the ocean the same way again. Imagine sinking below the waves, past the dancing shimmer of sunlight where fish glide like living jewels, past the point where blue fades into midnight, and then even deeper, where midnight forgets it ever had a color at all. The water around you thickens into something that feels less like a place and more like an idea, a vast, endless cathedral built entirely out of darkness. Down here, light is not just rare, it is an endangered species. You could shine a flashlight straight ahead, and it would illuminate only a tiny, reluctant bubble of space, as if the darkness were quietly swallowing its courage. This is the threshold of the ocean's deepest zones, a realm so quiet that even your thoughts feel loud, a place where mystery is not an occasional visitor, but the landlord. But strangely, while the deep sea is wrapped in an almost spiritual silence, it is also one of the most acoustically dramatic places on Earth. Sound here behaves like it is on vacation from the laws it follows at the surface. If you could speak, your voice would travel absurdly far, stretching out through the water with the enthusiasm of a gossip who just learned a secret. In fact, sound travels faster and more efficiently in deep water than anywhere on land, which is great news for fish that like long-distance communication, and terrible news for anyone hoping to hide their embarrassing stomach grumbles. If you listened closely, you might hear faint echoes of distant creatures, whale songs that drift like melancholy postcards, or the subtle crackle of shifting sediments miles away. Down here, a whisper behaves like a speech that refuses to end. As you continue to sink, the world becomes eerily monotone. The darkness is not the same kind you experience at night on land, where your eyes eventually adjust and shapes begin to reappear. This is a darkness so complete, it feels physical, as if it has weight. It presses around you as if curious about what you are doing here. Every direction looks identical, like a cosmic glitch in your visual settings. If you ever wanted to understand what infinity looks like, the deep ocean kindly presents it. No philosophical training required. There is also a strange emotional effect that settles in as you descend. The deep sea has a way of shrinking your sense of scale. Up on land, you know where the sky is, where the ground is, where your horizon politely ends. Down here, the horizon does nothing. It does not end so much as dissolve. You begin to feel like a tiny guest inside a planet-sized quiet room. And despite all of that silence, you are still aware that life is out there somewhere, threading its way through the dark, living in places that feel utterly impossible. But for now, in this opening moment, you have not met them yet. You are still floating in a pocket of pure emptiness, suspended in what feels like the Earth's unlit heartbeat. The funny thing is that while this place seems completely still, it is not. The water is always moving, always carrying the memory of distant storms and shifting currents. But everything here moves with patience. This is not a place for hurried creatures. This is a place where even water seems to stroll instead of rush. If the upper ocean is a bustling city full of motion and noise, the deep sea is the after-hours version of that city. Lights off, doors closed, and everyone whispering because the neighbors are asleep. And yet, something draws us deeper. Humans have never been good at leaving mysteries alone. We see a dark hole, and some part of our brain immediately says, we should go in there. The deep ocean feels like nature's invitation to poke at something profoundly unknowable. There is a sense that behind this thick curtain of darkness, a secret is waiting. Something wild, something quiet, something older than our entire species. The silence is not empty. It is holding its breath. That is why this chapter begins here, in the quiet where nothing seems to happen, but everything seems to wait. This is the front door to the ocean's darkest zones, and it is the perfect place to start a story about worlds that thrive far beyond the reach of light. Every chapter that follows digs deeper into the lives, landscapes, and strange physics of these shadowed realms. But for now, we stay suspended in this moment of descent, where darkness becomes a character and silence becomes a language. And if the ocean could speak here, in its softest voice, it might whisper, "Welcome, we have been expecting you." If you could freeze yourself mid-descent, somewhere between the glittering surface and the great underwater void, you would witness something beautiful and slightly heartbreaking. The slow dying of sunlight. At first, it happens subtly, like someone dimming the lights in a theater to let you know the show is about to begin. The bright ribbons of gold slip into a gentler blue, and then that blue starts to lose its confidence. Colors fade one by one, starting with the long wavelengths. Reds vanish almost immediately, which is why blood down here looks as dramatic as spilled ink in water. Oranges follow, then yellows, until the world settles into a melancholic spectrum of blues that seem to whisper, "You're not from around here, are you?" Sunlight is a fragile traveler in the ocean. Water is good at many things, supporting life, sculpting coastlines, hiding shipwrecks from nosy humans, but it is absolutely terrible at letting light pass through. Light arrives at the surface full of energy and optimism, and the ocean responds by absorbing that enthusiasm like a cosmic bouncer. Within just a few dozen meters, the sun's colors have been plucked apart. By 100 meters, daylight is no longer something you can rely on. At 200 meters, you could squint at the water with all the determination in the world and still struggle to distinguish anything more than shadows pretending to behave. The ocean does this filtering with remarkable efficiency. Each wavelength is selectively swallowed by the water, like it has a particular menu of favorite energies to snack on. Red light disappears first because its longer waves are absorbed quickly. Blue sticks around the longest because it scatters beautifully, which is why shallower seas shimmer like liquid sapphire. But scattering can only keep the illusion alive for so long. Eventually, even blue churns itself into nothingness, leaving behind a darkness that does not negotiate. Imagine trying to use your eyes in this world. Human eyes are great for many situations, like noticing a suspiciously large spider, or judging whether that slice of pizza is still edible, but they are hilariously unfit for the deep ocean. Our eyes evolved for a world drenched in sunlight. Down here, they may as well be decorative. You could widen them, narrow them, wave them around dramatically. They would still gather no more light than a solar panel set out in the middle of a moonless desert. At a certain point, your retina simply gives up and files a lighting complaint with management. If our eyes are useless, what about artificial light? Yes, you can bring lamps, and explorers often do, but the ocean barely tolerates that either. Light from a submersible behaves like it is afraid of commitment. It reaches only a short distance before surrendering to the darkness again, fading so abruptly that even the illuminated areas look suspicious, like they are hiding something just outside the beam. Observers often describe it as shining a flashlight into a dream. The boundaries feel soft, the edges incomplete, and everything you reveal seems aware of how temporary your glow really is. The slow fading of light also shapes the personality of the ocean. Brain span, shallow waters, fish flaunt colors so bright, you would swear evolution got drunk with a paint palette. But as light weakens, those colors become pointless. Down in the dimmer twilight zones, organisms shift to subtler hues, silvers, faint blues, and translucent bodies that seem designed for minimal visibility. Further down, where sunlight officially signs its resignation letter, many creatures stop relying on color altogether. Why dress up if no one can see the outfit? In this world, fashion is dead, and camouflage is the reigning monarch. What is perhaps most remarkable is that the ocean hides this transition flawlessly. There is no moment when the water clears its throat and announces, "Attention passengers, this is your final direct sunlight stop." Instead, everything dims quietly, elegantly, as if the ocean prefers to let your eyes figure it out at their own pace. One minute, you feel like a tourist in a blue cathedral. The next, you realize you can barely see the outline of your own hand. This fading sunlight also changes your sense of direction. Without a bright overhead point to anchor you, up and down start to feel like optional concepts. The water loses its color cues, leaving you suspended in a world that has completely abandoned the idea of orientation. You might tilt your head toward what you think is the surface, only to realize you are staring into absolute night. The ocean does not hand out compasses. It expects you to sort yourself out. Standing on land, it is easy to forget how shallow our relationship with sunlight is. We live our whole lives in a thin, illuminated shell, rarely considering that just beneath it lies a kingdom where light is treated like a rumor. Down here, the absence of sunlight is not merely a lack of brightness. It is an environmental force that shapes evolution, behavior, and entire ecosystems in ways our surface minds have a hard time wrapping themselves around. As the last hints of blue dissolve and the deep overtakes everything, you finally enter true darkness. Not symbolic darkness, not nighttime darkness, a darkness that feels ancient and unapologetic. But even here, life persists, life that does not wait for the sun or miss it, or even remember it exists. And as you drift deeper into the realm beyond light's reach, you begin to understand something simple and profound. The sun may rule the surface, but down here, it never held the throne. The deeper you sink through the ocean, the more the world begins to close in on you, literally. It happens quietly, without drama, the way a strong hug might turn into a mildly concerning embrace if the hugger forgot when to let go. By the time you reach the abyssal plains, the pressure around you has escalated into something that would make the toughest weightlifters reconsider their life choices. Down here, pressure is not just an environmental condition. It is the single most unavoidable fact of existence. Water, after all, does not take days off. It sits on top of you in a column stretching miles upward, piling its weight with the enthusiasm of a toddler stacking books on the family cat. If air pressure at sea level feels like nothing, deep ocean pressure feels like everything. Every 10 meters you descend adds another layer of water's weight pressing inward. And unlike air, water does not compress. It simply adds more and more mass. By the time you reach depths of thousands of meters, the pressure becomes so intense that a car would not simply be crushed. It would be politely transformed into a metal tortilla. Even a submarine designed for depth might groan like an old staircase in winter. You could bring the strongest steel beams humanity has invented, and the abyss would look at them the way a professional chef looks at a microwave dinner, unimpressed. Yet down on the abyssal plains, broad, dark, desert-like stretches of seafloor, life thrives. This is one of those moments where nature seems to flex, just to remind us who built the place. Creatures here endure pressures that could obliterate our fragile, air-filled bodies in an instant. If a human tried to visit without protection, they would be compressed faster than you could say, "I think I made a mistake." But for the animals that call the abyss home, this crushing force is not an obstacle. It is simply the background noise of their everyday lives. The key to their survival begins with their bodies, which are designed with a kind of casual genius. Unlike us, many deep-sea organisms do not rely on air-filled spaces. We are full of pockets, lungs, sinuses, ears, and these little cavities are exactly what pressure loves to destroy. Choose any air-filled structure in a human and imagine it suddenly shrinking to the size of a raisin. That is why we do not live down there. Deep-sea animals, however, avoid this weakness entirely. They build themselves like soft sculptures, gelatinous, flexible, and lacking anything that could implode. Their cells contain no gas bubbles. Instead, their internal fluids match the density of seawater so perfectly that the pressure outside and inside equalize. The ocean pushes against their bodies, and their bodies simply push back with quiet confidence. Some organisms even reinforce their cell membranes with molecules that act like tiny internal scaffolding. These specialized compounds keep proteins stable and functioning even when the pressure becomes absurd. If humans tried to operate enzymes under these conditions, the enzymes would behave like someone asked to finish a puzzle while being sat on by a grand piano. But deep-sea proteins, they carry on as if nothing unusual is happening. The pressure also forces life to adopt a slower, calmer rhythm. Energy is precious at these depths, and metabolism becomes a careful negotiation between survival and strategy. Many abyssal creatures drift, hover, or move with deliberate slowness, conserving every calorie as though each one were a rare and valuable artifact. It is not laziness, though they certainly do not rush for anything. It is efficiency. When the world around you is constantly trying to flatten you, you learn to pick your battles, and speed is rarely worth the investment. Even the structures of deep-sea animals reflect this environment. Fish here often have minimal skeletons, sometimes barely recognizable as bones at all. Their tissues are soft, and their bodies bend rather than resist. If you tried to bring one of these fish to the surface quickly, the lack of pressure would cause them to expand in ways they absolutely did not sign up for. Imagine inflating a balloon that was never meant to inflate. It is a bad time for everyone involved. That is why deep-sea research vessels must depressurize animals slowly, gently coaxing them into a new environment rather than shocking them into becoming unfortunate biological popcorn. But it is not only animals that bow to the pressure. The seafloor itself feels it too. The abyssal plains are often extraordinarily flat because the overwhelming weight above them presses sediments into smooth, unbroken stretches. Mountains that would be dramatic on land become modest, rounded hills down here, like the landscape has been politely ironed over the course of millions of years. Even rocks behave differently, compacting as minerals settle into dense layers that have spent eons enduring the quiet squeeze of the deep. Despite all of this, the abyss is not hostile in the way humans usually imagine. It is simply consistent, unapologetically so. And organisms have responded not with fear, but with creativity. They have mastered the art of living under pressures that would make a human body implode faster than a bad joke at a dinner party. They do not just survive, they thrive. Each species an elegant demonstration of how adaptable life can be when the world insists on pushing from every direction. So as you drift across the abyssal plains, vast, silent, and heavy with the weight of the world above, you cannot help but appreciate the creatures that glide effortlessly through the pressure. They are not crushed, they are not overwhelmed. They are, in their own calm and unbothered way, experts at ignoring the impossible. Long before you reach the ocean's deepest pits, the temperature begins its quiet rebellion. Warmth, that familiar surface comfort we take for granted, slips away layer by layer until the surrounding water becomes so cold, it feels like the planet is giving you the silent treatment. This cold is not the kind you experience on a winter morning when your breath fogs and your hands complain. This is cold that has made long-term life choices. This is cold with dedication. In the deep ocean, temperatures hover just above freezing, Yet the water stubbornly refuses to turn into ice, holding itself in a liquid state the way someone insists they are fine, despite every visible sign pointing to the contrary. If the deep sea had a thermostat, it would be stuck on the lowest setting, probably due to millions of years of corrosion and a lack of customer support. Down here, the warmth of the sun is not merely absent, it is ancient history, a forgotten rumor. Heat from the surface does not sink appreciably because water is fantastic at resisting temperature change. It takes an enormous amount of energy to warm it up or cool it down, which is why the top of the ocean is a toasty, sunlit playground, while the bottom is a frozen archive where warmth goes to retire. The cold in these depths is so persistent, so absolute, that it begins shaping everything it touches. You would think a place this frigid would be empty, a vast refrigerator no creature in their right evolutionary mind would dare enter. Instead, life shows up anyway, like guests at a party where the host forgot to turn on the heater, but the snacks were just too good to pass up. It is one of the great ironies of the planet. Some of Earth's most resilient creatures survive in temperatures that could make a penguin say, "I'm going to sit this one out." But before we get to those hardy residents, let's talk about the physics that make the deep sea such a relentless cold sink. As warm surface water circulates, it cools, sinks, and becomes part of a global system known as thermohaline circulation, the ocean's version of a very slow, very patient conveyor belt. Over centuries, this water travels the world, descends into the deep, and brings with it a temperature profile that never rises above a few degrees above freezing. These currents drift like underwater ghosts, transporting cold with a consistency that would impress even the most precise air conditioning unit. This cold environment also creates one of the most immediate problems for anything trying to survive here: chemistry. Chemical reactions slow drastically in frigid temperatures. Imagine trying to stir honey that has spent the night in a freezer. That sluggishness happens inside cells too. Enzymes that catalyze essential reactions would normally shiver themselves into uselessness. Yet deep-sea organisms have adopted a clever biochemical toolkit that allows life to remain active. Their enzymes are built differently, structured to remain flexible and functional, even when the surrounding water is a step away from freezing solid. If human enzymes tried to operate here, they would stall out faster than a car battery on a polar morning. Cold also affects movement. Muscles contract more slowly, and nerves send signals at a pace that could best be described as unhurried. Deep-sea animals have adapted with bodies that move as though the concept of urgency was never invented. Many glide instead of dart. They drift instead of sprint. This is not laziness, it is optimization. When energy is precious and the cold is unyielding, motion is a resource, not a habit. Even the structure of deep-sea organisms reflects their battle with the cold. Cell membranes would normally stiffen in low temperatures, becoming about as flexible as a frozen garden hose. To counter this, deep-sea creatures incorporate special fats into their cells, molecules that prevent the membrane from solidifying. These fats act like tiny molecular antifreeze agents, keeping the cells soft, stretchy, and fully functional. If you tried to replace human cell membranes with theirs, your biology would suddenly feel like it had switched to a winter-ready formula. This cold environment also challenges larger biological processes, like reproduction. Eggs and larvae develop more slowly, sometimes taking years to reach maturity. Life in these depths is unhurried, not because it wants to be, but because the cold enforces it. Entire life cycles stretch on like long novels written in slow ink. Yet for species that have mastered this pace, slow growth becomes an investment strategy. They live longer, endure more, and adapt to a world where patience is the price of existence. The cold also changes the landscape of the abyss. As water approaches freezing, it becomes denser, allowing these frigid layers to sink and settle in the deepest regions like a chilled blanket. And where fresh water would freeze, seawater, with its dissolved salts, resists solidification. If it could talk, it would say, "Sure, I'm cold, but I'm not that cold." It takes temperatures well below zero for seawater to freeze, making the deep a place where liquid water survives precisely because it is salty. The ocean, stubborn as always, insists on staying fluid. From a human perspective, being in this temperature feels like entering a realm where warmth has been outlawed. If you ventured down without protection, hypothermia would greet you with speed and enthusiasm. Yet the creatures who live here appear utterly relaxed about this situation. They glide through the icy dark with the casual confidence of beings who have never once owned a sweater. Their bodies do not fight the cold. They are sculpted from it. So as you drift across the abyssal plains, surrounded by water cold enough to make a snowman file a complaint, you realize that this environment is not inhospitable by accident. It is inhospitable by design, shaped over millions of years into a selective crucible. And the organisms that live here are the quiet champions of endurance, thriving in temperatures where heat is nothing more than a half-forgotten memory. If the upper ocean is a lively neighborhood full of honking fish, opinionated dolphins, and whales singing with the emotional intensity of opera performers, the midnight zone is the quiet apartment several floors down where no one plays loud music and everyone tiptoes like the floor is made of polite eggshells. Descending into this region feels like entering a library that has forgotten it used to be an ocean. The water settles into a kind of sound-dampened calm, not because sound cannot travel, oh, it travels beautifully, but because very few creatures dare to make it. Down here, noise is not just risky. It is a neon "come eat me" sign in a neighborhood where the locals are always looking for a snack. The stillness is astonishing. You could pause mid-descent, hold your breath, and listen. What you would hear is the deep ocean equivalent of a very patient pause. No waves crashing, no chattering, no distant engines. The only sounds come from the occasional shifts of unseen animals, the subtle movements of water, or a soft creak from your submersible reminding you that it, too, is slightly nervous. Silence in the midnight zone is not empty. It is thick, like something you move through. It presses close, the way darkness does, and yet it never feels oppressive. It feels intentional, as though the entire ecosystem is cooperating to keep its secrets. This near-total stillness forces life to rethink communication. On land, animals shout, roar, chirp, or bark their feelings into the air. In the midnight zone, shouting is a very efficient way to turn yourself into someone else's lunch. So animals here choose methods of communication so subtle, so quiet, that they make whispering seem excessive. Many creatures limit themselves to faint vibrations or tiny water movements that only close neighbors can detect. Social butterflies do not exist here. Social jellyfish, perhaps, gentle, drifting, and speaking only when necessary. The stars of midnight zone communication are the bioluminescent creatures whose bodies light up with chemical precision. While vocal cords are useless and flashy sounds attract trouble, bioluminescence becomes a kind of visual language. Imagine texting someone in the dark, except your phone is your face and the message glows from your skin. These flashes of light serve as signals, warnings, invitations, identification badges, or sometimes simply an aquatic, "Hey, I'm over here, please don't accidentally swallow me." And because the darkness is absolute, the tiniest glimmer can carry astonishing meaning. Different species write their messages with different patterns. Some emit quick pulses, like Morse code generated by a creature that never attended a military academy. Others glow with a slow and steady radiance that forms a sort of personal signature. Some display shifting waves of light, elegant ripples that would make any nightclub lighting technician jealous. And many animals are very selective with when they use their glow. Each flash has a purpose. Each glimmer is a calculated choice in an environment where unnecessary brightness is about as welcome as dropping a stack of symbols in a meditation class. The creatures who use these signals have evolved remarkable biological tools to manage them. Special light-producing organs, photophores, dot their skin in intricate patterns. Some photophores can be dimmed, brightened, or angled, as though the animal is adjusting a built-in spotlight. The chemical reaction that fuels the glow is a quiet collaboration between luciferin and luciferase, Molecules that sound suspiciously dramatic, but act like the world's chillest light switch. When triggered, they release energy as light, a soft emission that is visible but silent. This silence is key because the midnight zone is a place where predation operates through patience and stealth. Many organisms use their lights to lure prey, presenting a faint glow that suggests food, friendship, or curiosity before revealing the less friendly reality of teeth. Others use bioluminescence defensively, releasing clouds of glowing particles that drift away like decoy fireworks, hopefully distracting a predator long enough for a quick escape. You might say they throw a glow grenade and politely exit the situation. Some species go beyond simple flashes and utilize counter-illumination, a method so clever it borders on smug. These animals adjust the brightness of their bellies to match the faint light filtering from above, making them nearly invisible from below. Predators looking upwards see only a continuation of the dim ceiling of water. It is the deep-sea version of wearing the world's most effective camouflage jacket. This tactic is so successful that it has evolved in multiple unrelated species, suggesting that if nature were a classroom, counter-illumination would be the kid everyone copied homework from. In such a quiet environment, even social behaviors transform. Courtship becomes a subtle dance of shimmering cues and measured glows. Instead of romantic serenades or flashy displays of feathers, deep-sea animals perform their attraction rituals with patterns of light that look like coded messages for anyone not fluent in the dialect. A male might send a flicker pattern that says, "I am available, mildly nutritious, and not intending to eat you." A female might reply with a glow that means, "Approach cautiously, I am considering your application." But the stillness of the midnight zone is not simply about communication, it shapes the mood of the place. Without sound, without light, without rushing currents, the world feels suspended. Everything moves slowly, deliberately, as though the ocean is conducting a silent symphony composed entirely of pauses. Even predators must behave with a certain decorum, advancing with the careful patience of creatures who understand that sudden movements create noise, and noise creates vulnerability. And as you drift through this realm where silence is survival and light is language, you begin to appreciate how different this world is from the bustling surface. Here, communication does not rely on volume or bravado. It relies on precision, subtlety, and a glowing vocabulary that turns darkness into dialogue. In the midnight zone, life speaks softly, but with brilliance. If you travel far enough into the ocean's dark interior, you eventually reach a point where the world stops offering light and starts creating it. This is where bioluminescence takes the spotlight, quite literally, animating the deep with flashes, glimmers, and swirling patterns that look like someone spilled a galaxy into the water. It is one of nature's most theatrical tricks, but unlike human-made glow sticks that require being bent into activation and then fizzle out with disappointing predictability, underwater bioluminescence is powered by chemistry that is elegant, efficient, and astonishingly repeatable. Creatures here can glow all night long, like they received an open invitation to an eternal rave and arrived fully prepared with biological disco gear. To understand how these animals generate their miniature light shows, you have to zoom down past skin, past cells, and into the bustling microscopic world where the real magic happens. The central players in this glowing drama are luciferin and luciferase, two molecules whose names sound like they joined a rock band after a disagreement with the periodic table. Luciferin is the molecule that actually produces light, and luciferase is the enzyme that encourages luciferin to do its thing. Together, they form an unstoppable power duo, like the Batman and Robin of underwater illumination. The process works like this. Luciferin sits quietly in a cell, minding its own business, until luciferase strolls over and says, "Let's make some radiance." The enzyme helps luciferin react with oxygen, and that very reaction releases energy in the form of photons, tiny particles of light. And just like that, the creature glows. No batteries, no wires, no panicked searching for spare bulbs, just pure chemistry humming along in the dark. But the efficiency of this system is what puts human engineering to shame. In our world, making light usually involves generating a lot of heat. Think of incandescent bulbs that warm your fingers or laptops that turn into portable ovens. Bioluminescence, however, is nearly heatless. Scientists call it cold light, though it has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with efficiency. Almost all the energy in the reaction becomes light instead of waste heat. If human technology achieved that level of efficiency, power bills would be a quaint artifact of the past, and our devices would stop doubling as hand warmers. The diversity of luciferin molecules across species is equally fascinating. There is not just one luciferin. There are many types, each with its own molecular signature, each fine-tuned by nature to create different colors and intensities of light. Some glow deep blue, the wavelength most easily visible in water. Others shine green or turquoise. A few rare species even produce red light, a bold choice in a world where red wavelengths vanish quickly, like the ocean equivalent of wearing formal attire to a pajama party. But in each case, the glow is tailored to the creature's specific needs, whether that is attracting prey, signaling to mates, or confusing predators long enough to make a dramatic exit. Photophores, the specialized organs responsible for housing this light-producing machinery, are architectural masterpieces. Some are simple clusters of glowing cells, while others have reflectors, lenses, and shutters that function like tiny biological flashlights. Imagine having a built-in desk lamp under your skin that you can aim, dim, or switch on in artistic patterns. That is everyday reality for many deep-sea animals. Some photophores can open and close like eyelids. Others can rotate, focusing beams downward or outward. A few species, including certain fish, can swivel their photophores like nature's version of a spotlight operator. If there were an award for best underwater lighting design, photophores would win every category. In some species, bioluminescence is not produced by the animal itself, but by tiny symbiotic bacteria that glow like microscopic lanterns. These bacteria take up residence in special chambers and provide illumination in exchange for a place to live, a deal that seems unfairly tilted in favor of the bacteria. But the host animals do not seem to mind. They use these bacterial light sources for communication or camouflage, holding them like nature's equivalent of a lantern, except far less likely to require rewiring. Other creatures use bioluminescence not just as a steady glow, but as an explosive display. Certain jellyfish release shimmering clouds of light that scatter through the water like a slow-motion firework. Some crustaceans shoot jets of glowing fluid from their mouths, an impressive trick that seems designed solely to make observers reconsider their assumptions about crustacean etiquette. Even squid get in on the act, releasing bursts of glowing ink that confuse predators, while allowing the squid to slip away with all the subtlety of someone ducking behind a curtain after flipping on a smoke machine. But one of the most remarkable features of bioluminescence is how deeply it is woven into survival strategies. Many deep-sea creatures live in a perpetual state of suspicion, always aware that they could become part of someone else's digestive plans at any moment. Light becomes a tactical tool. Glow for too long and you attract unwanted attention. Glow too little and you miss crucial opportunities. It is a constant balance between being seen and not being seen. The deep sea is a place where flashing a light can mean the difference between dinner and being dinner. This chemical mastery also gives the deep ocean an unexpected sense of intimacy. Glowing patterns travel only so far. They are not like whale calls or whale gossip that roam across miles. Bioluminescent signals are local, personal, and intentional. They illuminate moments, not landscapes. A single blink might carry meaning only for one nearby companion or passerby. Every spark is a quiet announcement in a world that rarely shouts. And perhaps that is the real beauty of bioluminescence. It turns the deep ocean into a living constellation. Every spark of light tells a story written not in ink, but in chemistry. creatures glide through the dark with their own private lanterns, glowing not out of whimsy, but out of evolutionary brilliance. Down here, you do not need the sun to shine. The night makes its own stars. Predators in the deep ocean are not merely hunters. They are works of dramatic architecture sculpted by an environment that plays by mysterious rules. Up at the surface, predators rely on speed, eyesight, and the occasional overconfidence. Down here, however, speed is a luxury, eyesight is barely a rumor, and confidence is replaced by a quiet, calculated menace. This is a world where the lights never turn on, where noise is an existential liability, and where evolution has decided that if you are going to have teeth, they may as well be shaped like the word absolutely not. To meet these creatures, you must imagine an environment where being seen is nearly impossible, and being heard is almost as risky as announcing your ATM PIN number to a crowded street. Hunting becomes a game of patience, ingenuity, and anatomy that borders on the absurd. Many predators adopt a stillness so perfect it could win awards. They hover, motionless, conserving every drop of energy while waiting for the faintest hint of movement. In the deep ocean, rushing toward prey is not just inefficient, it is socially frowned upon by every creature trying to stay alive. The best hunters behave as though they have all the time in the world, because down here, they sort of do. Take the anglerfish, a celebrity of deep-sea nightmares, and a creature so brilliantly designed for darkness that it seems almost smug about it. Instead of chasing prey, the anglerfish turns laziness into a survival strategy. It uses its glowing lure, an extension of its dorsal spine topped with a bioluminescent beacon, to attract curious meals that swim straight toward its mouth. It is the ultimate example of, if you build it, they will come. Except the building is a floating light bulb, and the coming ends rather poorly for the visitor. When the prey finally drifts close enough, the anglerfish snaps its jaw shut with a speed that suggests it is capable of being motivated when snacks are involved. But the anglerfish's real genius is its jaw structure. Its bones are flexible, hinged in a way that allows the mouth to open so wide it looks like a geometry problem gone wrong. Combine that with teeth angled inward, barbed hooks that ensure once something enters, it has filed for permanent residency, and you have a predator that thrives through architectural intimidation. These teeth are translucent and curved, each one looking like a scolding finger, wagging at anything foolish enough to approach. Other predators take a different approach entirely. The gulper eel, for example, is less about sharp teeth and more about sheer surface area. Its jaw can unhinge into a cavernous opening that seems to defy every concept of proportion. When it feeds, it does not nibble or bite. It engulfs, swallowing prey nearly its own size with the slow, confident motion of someone casually gathering laundry. While the eel looks admittedly strange, like a deflated balloon with ambition, it is perfectly adapted for a world where meals are rare and must be taken whole whenever possible. Then there is the viperfish, a creature whose smile could clear a room. Its teeth are so long that they do not fit inside its mouth. Instead, they slide into grooves along the outside of its head, forming a grin that suggests it has never once had a warm, comforting thought. The viperfish lunges at high speed for a deep-sea creature, meaning it moves quickly enough to make its victim regret its last 3 decisions. It uses a bioluminescent lure as well, but unlike the anglerfish's gentle glow, the viperfish flashes its lure like an emergency beacon, stunning prey just long enough to strike. Predators also use their environment as part of their hunting strategy. Some hide in pits or behind geological structures, blending into the sediment until prey stumbles into reach. Many are nearly invisible, with bodies so transparent you could read a newspaper through them if newspapers traveled this far down. Transparency is a precious advantage in darkness, because while it seems counterintuitive, why hide when everything is already dark? It protects against predators that rely on profiles and silhouettes. Being see-through means you are functionally not there, which is a fantastic evolutionary achievement. Still others use chemical cues to hunt. With smell and taste sharpened far beyond human capability, They sense faint molecules drifting in the water, tracing them with patient precision. In an environment where movements are slow and distances deceptive, the ability to follow a chemical breadcrumb trail is the equivalent of having an internal GPS guidance system included. The hunting strategies used by these predators reflect the deep sea's defining characteristics: scarcity of food, scarcity of light, and scarcity of second chances. Everything that lives here must operate with a kind of fatalistic resourcefulness. Efficiency is not merely beneficial, it is mandatory. A missed meal could mean days or weeks before the next opportunity arises. Predators have evolved to make every attempt count. But perhaps the most striking thing about deep-sea predators is that their terrifying appearance is not actually about aggression. It is about survival in a world that demands extremes. Their enormous jaws, needle-like teeth, luminous lures, gelatinous bodies, and unblinking eyes are not products of cruelty. They are products of necessity. Evolution is not trying to frighten anyone. It is simply trying to keep its creations alive long enough to pass on their eccentric blueprints. And yet, despite the stillness, despite the darkness, despite the eerie silence, predators here are not mindless eating machines. They are perfectly honed instruments shaped by one of Earth's harshest environments. They hunt with quiet precision, patient strategy, and a deep understanding, encoded in their biology, of how to survive when the entire world around them whispers, "Good luck." By the time you reach the deep sea, really reach it, not in the casual, "I've been snorkeling once" sense, you begin to notice that the creatures around you look less like animals and more like ideas. This is where evolution stops pretending to follow any rulebook and instead starts doodling in the margins. Shapes warp, textures shimmer, and bodies seem assembled from experimental prototypes that somehow made it past quality control. The result is a cast of organisms that defy conventional definition, as if nature decided that the deep ocean was the one place where creativity would run completely unchecked. One of the strangest and most elegant examples is the barrel-eye fish, an animal so visually confusing that the first scientists who saw it probably had to sit down for a moment. Its head is transparent, truly transparent, like an organic glass dome. Inside that dome, two tubular green eyes aim straight upward, scanning the faint silhouettes of potential prey drifting above. Imagine walking around with a see-through forehead displaying your eye muscles like interior artwork. The barrel eye does it, effortlessly, floating with the calm confidence of a creature that knows it is the only one on the block with a built-in skylight. Another marvel is the blobfish, famous not because of how it looks in its natural habitat, but because of how it looks when humans rudely drag it to the surface. Down in the deep, this species has a firm, balanced body designed for the pressure. Bring it upward, and without the immense weight of water supporting it, the poor creature collapses into something resembling a melted sculpture. It is not unattractive in the deep, it is merely misunderstood. If anything, it is a reminder that looks are relative. Drop a human several kilometers down, and we too would undergo aesthetic changes best described as suboptimal. Gelatinous bodies are a theme in these waters. A huge proportion of deep-sea creatures look as though they are made from partially set jelly. This is not a design flaw, it is exquisitely functional. When the world around you applies immense pressure and offers very little food, having a soft, low-maintenance body becomes an evolutionary bargain. No heavy skeletal structure to build, no thick muscles to feed, just a gently wobbling form drifting through the water like a slow-motion watercolor painting. These bodies deform easily, which is a polite way of saying they squish without breaking, an essential feature where pressure wants to compress everything into a tidy package. Some gelatinous creatures take this softness to artistic extremes. Certain deep-sea jellyfish appear as floating umbrellas of liquid glass, their bodies so translucent they seem barely there. When disturbed, Some reveal hidden patterns of iridescence that ripple through their bells like shifting oil on water. They are not trying to be beautiful. They simply are, in the quiet way that comes from existing far beyond the reach of observers who might judge them. Then you meet the sea cucumber, a creature that looks like evolution took a sausage casing, filled it with marine aspiration, and said, "Good enough." Despite its simple appearance, it plays a crucial role in deep-sea ecosystems, processing sediment and recycling nutrients. Some species can liquefy parts of their bodies to squeeze into small crevices, a skill humans tragically lack unless you count trying to fit into jeans from 3 years ago. The diversity becomes even more pronounced with creatures like the rat-tail fish, whose long, tapering bodies stretch into elegant whips behind them. Their heads look almost too large for their slender frames, as if someone resized the front half of the animal by accident. Yet the shape works perfectly for navigating the soft sediments of the seafloor. Form follows function, though the form occasionally looks like it came from a sketch inspired by questionable sleep habits. Other species seem to lean fully into the surreal. The Dumbo octopus, for instance, sports 2 ear-like fins that flap gently, giving it the appearance of an undersea cherub drifting through the abyss. Its soft, rounded body moves with a serene grace that seems at odds with the harshness of its environment. The Dumbo octopus looks like a creature that wandered out of a children's storybook, got lost, and somehow adapted flawlessly to one of the toughest ecosystems on Earth. Then there are the deep-sea worms, an entire category of what is happening in biological form. Some are thin and thread-like, others adorned with colorful frills, still others sporting bristles that shimmer like threads caught in moonlight. Each design offers a unique advantage: increased surface area for sensing vibrations, protection from predators, or assistance with gliding through the water with minimal effort. In the deep sea, even worms are allowed a little flair. Perhaps the most striking thing about these body shapes is how unbothered they are by human expectations. We are used to symmetry, clear textures, and defined faces. The deep sea offers none of these. Instead, it presents beings that evolved according to the demands of pressure, scarcity, and perpetual darkness. Eyes move to unusual positions. Mouths widen into improbable shapes. Bodies become see-through, floppy, elongated, or prismatic, not because it looks surreal, but because it works. And in that sense, the deep sea becomes a museum of evolutionary improvisation. Every organism is a sculpture shaped by conditions that would defeat nearly any surface-dwelling creature. They are strange, yes, but they are also perfectly engineered, each one an example of biology solving problems with creativity that borders on playful madness. In these bizarre shapes, you see the deep ocean's personality, not hostile, not chaotic, but boldly unconventional. It is a realm where nature tries everything, keeps what works, and leaves the rest drifting like forgotten sketches in the dark. Reaching the deep-sea floor feels like arriving at the Earth's forgotten basement, the one no one visits, unless something important has gone missing, or a scientific expedition has drawn the short straw. After drifting for hours through ink-black water, the bottom appears so gradually you almost miss it. One moment, you are suspended in infinite darkness. The next, your lights sweep across a landscape so vast and empty, it feels like the ocean has turned into a desert that forgot to bring sand. This is the deep sea floor. Flat, ancient, and quietly dramatic in a way that only a landscape shaped by millions of years of pressure and patience can be. The abyssal plains dominate this realm. They stretch out for thousands of kilometers, smoother than any parking lot humanity has ever paved, yet made not of asphalt, but of fine sediment drifting down over geological timescales. These sediments settle grain by patient grain, forming a soft, powdery blanket that covers the ocean crust beneath. If the Earth were keeping a diary, the abyssal plains would be the pages where it records the slow fall of everything that once lived above. Skeletons of microscopic creatures, flakes of organic debris, particles of dust from continents half a world away. In a strange way, The plains are a giant scrapbook of planetary history, created without any attempt at organization. But the calm surface of these plains is misleading. Beneath this layer of settling dust lies an interior shaped by tectonic shifts and volcanic ambition. The oceanic crust below is constantly moving, though at speeds so slow they would make even the laziest glacier feel athletic. These movements create long, subtle ridges and depressions, giving parts of the seafloor a faintly wrinkled appearance, like the skin of a planet that has lived a long and complicated life. Then there are the canyons, immense yawning cuts that gouge through the seabed with ancient force. Some of these canyons rival the size of their terrestrial cousins, plunging deeper than the Grand Canyon and stretching longer than entire mountain ranges back on land. They are carved not by flowing water, but by gravity-driven avalanches of sediment, slumping down continental slopes in slow-motion tumbling events. These underwater canyons are scars of geological upheaval, reminders that even in the deep, the Earth's crust is far from still. They twist and wind in shapes that suggest a past filled with collapses, fractures, and terrain that has been reshaped again and again by forces too immense to witness directly. As your lights skim over the landscape, you notice how uneven the sea floor becomes the farther you move from the plains. In some areas, towering ridges rise from the bottom like submerged fangs. These are remnants of mid-ocean spreading zones, places where molten rock once pushed through the crust, cooled, and created jagged topography that looks suspiciously like the Earth spent an era experimenting with abstract sculpture. Even now, these ridges shift gradually as tectonic plates inch apart, continually renewing the sea floor as older crust sinks elsewhere into the planet's interior. It is recycling on a planetary scale, slow but relentless. Scattered across the plains are geological oddities that seem almost decorative. You might encounter manganese nodules, round, lumpy mineral formations that grow so slowly a human lifetime would not be enough to detect their progress. They form layer by delicate layer, accumulating metals from the surrounding water until they look like dark, knobbly cobblestones strewn randomly across the sediment. They are not alive, yet their presence gives the seafloor an eerie resemblance to an abandoned garden where strange mineral fruits have fallen and fossilized. As you traverse this landscape, it becomes clear that the deep sea floor is not an empty wasteland, but a library of geological memory. Every ridge, every canyon, every gently sloping basin has a story etched into its shape. Some formations record the pull and push of tectonic plates. Others are the remnants of massive landslides triggered long before humans existed to worry about coastline erosion. Still others bear the signature of ancient volcanic eruptions that spewed lava into the ocean, cooling instantly into black bulbous rocks that now lie half buried under centuries of sediment. One of the most visually striking aspects of the deep sea floor is how quiet it is. This is not the bustling world of coral reefs or the swirling chaos of surface currents. Here, water moves slowly, sediment drifts lazily, geological change occurs over millions of years. Everything about this realm communicates patience. Even the creatures living here adopt the mood. They glide close to the bottom, stirring up gentle clouds of dust that take minutes to settle again. Their movements are careful, unhurried, respectful of a world that has no interest in sudden drama. And yet, the silence is deceptive. Underneath the stillness, immense forces continue to shape the terrain. The Earth's crust flexes, breaks, and reforms. New seafloor spreads from volcanic ridges, while old seafloor is slowly consumed in distant trenches. In the deep ocean, geology is not an event, it is a lifestyle. As your journey continues across this vast, dimly lit expanse, something becomes unmistakably clear. The deep sea floor is not just the bottom of the ocean. It is the oldest face of the Earth, lined with ridges, wrinkles, and scars that tell stories of a planet in constant motion. It is quiet, yes, still, from a distance. But every formation is a reminder of a restless crust, an ancient engine, and a world that has been shaping itself long before sunlight ever touched the sea. As you cruise across the deep sea floor, the landscape suddenly shifts from serene minimalism to something that looks suspiciously like the set of a science fiction film. Pillars begin rising from the sediment, dark, ragged towers shaped by forces that seem too dramatic for such a quiet part of the world. At first, they appear dormant, just jagged lumps of rock. But then, with a sudden billowing flourish, one of them exhales a plume of shimmering fluid so striking that for a moment you forget that the ocean down here is nearly freezing. These are hydrothermal vents, Earth's underwater chimneys, and they are the last place you would expect to find bustling life. Hydrothermal vents form along tectonic boundaries where seawater seeps into cracks in the crust and descends toward molten rock. As the water travels downward, it heats up to temperatures that would make your kitchen kettle feel inadequate. It dissolves minerals from the surrounding rock, collecting metals like iron, manganese, zinc, and sulfur compounds. Then, supercharged and over-caffeinated, the water rockets back upward, re-emerging through the sea floor in jets of hot, mineral-rich fluid. When this fluid meets the icy deep-sea water, the dissolved minerals precipitate out, forming towering stacks known as vent chimneys. Some chimneys, called black smokers, blast out dark plumes packed with metal sulfides, making them look like underwater smokestacks, participating in a very dramatic reenactment of industrial history. Others, known as white smokers, release lighter-colored fluid rich in barium, calcium, and silica. They appear ghostly, as though whispering minerals into the abyss. These structures grow over time, layer upon layer, their shapes dictated by chemical reactions so precise they could double as geology's version of pottery thrown on nature's wheel. Temperatures near the vents can soar well above boiling, over 350 degrees Celsius in some cases. Yet just a meter or two away, the water slips back into near freezing cold. This gradient creates an environment so contradictory, it seems custom designed to confuse scientists and impress everyone else. And somehow, against all intuition, life absolutely thrives here. Entire communities flourish around these chimneys, living not on sunlight, but on chemistry. These ecosystems rely on a process called chemosynthesis. Instead of using sunlight to produce energy, organisms, primarily bacteria and archaea, use chemicals, particularly hydrogen sulfide, as fuel. To put it another way, they turn toxic gas into lunch. These microbes are the power plants of the vent world, supporting a food web so bizarre, it seems to have been constructed by evolution during a particularly experimental phase. Among the most iconic vent dwellers are the giant tube worms. These creatures can grow taller than a person and look like white tubes topped with crimson plumes, as though someone crossed a blood-red feather duster with a pipe organ. They have no mouths, no stomachs, and no digestive system whatsoever. Instead, they house symbiotic bacteria inside their bodies, chemical partners that convert vent minerals into nutrients. The worms simply provide the bacteria with shelter and access to the chemicals they need. It is an arrangement so cooperative that if tube worms had contracts, they would probably list mutual respect under job expectations. Then there are the vent crabs, small, ghostly white creatures that scuttle across the chimneys with the enthusiasm of customers browsing a mineral buffet. They feed on bacteria mats and sometimes on each other, because the deep sea is not a place where culinary snobbery flourishes. Vent shrimp cluster around the hottest parts of the chimneys, equipped with specialized photoreceptors that detect faint thermal light emitted by the superheated water. Their eyes have effectively evolved to see heat, which is the deep sea version of developing X-ray vision because it seemed useful at the time. Other inhabitants include snails with iron scales, literally shells and footplates infused with iron sulfide minerals. These metallic snails look like they are wearing tiny suits of armor, as if they are preparing for medieval underwater jousting tournaments. The minerals help protect them from predators and extreme temperatures, adding a level of aesthetic flair that is surprisingly stylish for creatures living in total darkness. What makes vent ecosystems remarkable is how quickly they spring up and how quickly they vanish. Vents are temporary features, geological pop-up shops on the sea floor. Some last for decades, others for centuries, but all eventually cool or collapse. When a vent dies, its community collapses with it, forcing creatures to migrate or perish. Yet when a new vent forms, life arrives with astonishing speed, as though the deep sea has a standing army of microbes and larvae, just waiting for the next opportunity to set up shop. The chemical plumes rising from these vents also influence ocean chemistry on a global scale. Metals and minerals carried upward by the streams disperse far beyond the immediate ecosystem, transported by currents that weave through the ocean like invisible arteries. The vents are not merely isolated oddities. They are active contributors to the ocean's geochemical cycles. Being near a hydrothermal vent feels like visiting a contradiction made real. Scorching heat nestled inside crushing cold, thriving life framed by surrounding barrenness, bustling activity in a realm defined by stillness. It is a reminder that life does not ask for ideal conditions. It asks only for possibilities. And when the deep sea offers those possibilities in the form of mineral-rich plumes, evolution rises to the challenge with creativity that borders on audacity. Here, in the shadow of these shimmering chimneys, the ocean reveals one of its most astonishing truths. Life may need energy, but it does not need the sun. It only needs a spark, and the deep earth provides that spark in boiling jets of mineral-rich water that turn the darkest places on Earth into vibrant, thriving worlds. If the surface world is powered by sunlight, plants absorbing golden rays, animals eating those plants, and humans eating, well, everything, then the deep sea runs on a completely different operating system. Down here, where sunlight never arrives and photosynthesis is about as useful as a solar calculator in a cave, life has turned to chemistry for nourishment. In these depths, energy is not caught from the sky, it is brewed from the earth, and the organisms responsible for performing this transformative magic are microbes so tiny you could fit billions of them in a teaspoon, yet so influential they fundamentally rewrite our understanding of what life needs in order to exist. Chemosynthetic microbes are the chemical chefs of the deep ocean, running kitchens in places where no other organism could hope to find food. Instead of light, they rely on inorganic molecules, hydrogen sulfide, methane, ammonia, iron, and more, mixing them with carbon dioxide to produce organic compounds. It is a recipe with ingredients the rest of life typically avoids. If photosynthetic organisms are gardeners, peacefully gathering sunlight, chemosynthetic microbes are alchemists, extracting energy from substances that smell like laboratory warnings and caution labels. The process itself, chemosynthesis, is elegantly simple in concept and thrillingly complicated in practice. Just as plants use sunlight to assemble carbon into sugars, chemosynthetic microbes use the energy released from chemical reactions to build carbohydrates. In hydrothermal vent ecosystems, for example, one of the star ingredients is hydrogen sulfide, a gas known for smelling like rotten eggs, though the microbes are fortunately not fussy diners. When hydrogen sulfide reacts with oxygen inside these microbes, it releases energy the microbes capture and use to power their biochemical machinery. Imagine a tiny organism wearing a chef's hat, stirring a bubbling pot of sulfur compounds, happily whipping up nutritional molecules for itself and for entire communities of larger creatures. It is an absurd mental image, yes, but not that far off from reality. Chemosynthetic microbes are the foundational cooks of the deep sea food web, generating the primary energy source that everything else depends on. Without them, vent ecosystems would collapse into lifeless mineral formations. With them, the vents teem with worms, crabs, snails, and shrimp, all supported by microscopic chefs tirelessly converting harsh chemicals into edible fuel. These microbes come in many varieties. Some live freely on vent surfaces, forming fuzzy bacterial mats that ripple like carpets across the chimneys. Others settle inside the bodies of larger animals in relationships so intimate they would make human roommates seem detached. The giant tube worms from the previous chapter, for example, contain entire colonies of chemosynthetic bacteria within their tissues. The worms provide housing and access to chemical ingredients while the bacteria cook up organic molecules. It is one of nature's most productive partnerships, and one of its most charmingly imbalanced, since the worms rely entirely on their microbial tenants for survival. But chemosynthesis is not confined to hydrothermal vents. It also thrives at cold seeps, places where methane and other hydrocarbons leak out of the sea floor at temperatures barely above freezing. These seeps host their own communities of chemosynthetic microbes, which treat methane the way plants treat sunlight, as fuel for crafting life. Some microbes even form dense mats around seeps, turning the seafloor into fields of living chemistry experiments. Others build symbiotic relationships with clams and mussels, nestling inside their gills and producing nutrients while the hosts anchor them in place above a steady supply of chemical ingredients. The sheer diversity of chemical strategies is staggering. Some microbes oxidize iron, turning rust-like particles into their version of breakfast. Others use nitrate or even hydrogen gas. There are bacteria that consume methane at such efficient rates, they help regulate greenhouse gases on a planetary scale. Tiny organisms acting as global custodians. In the deep sea, every molecule is a potential meal, provided a microbe has evolved the right biochemical tools. What makes chemosynthesis so remarkable is that it completely detaches life from sunlight. For most of human history, we assumed light was essential for the existence of ecosystems. The idea that organisms could build food from chemicals alone was not just unexpected, it was revolutionary. Chemosynthesis showed that life does not need the sun. It needs only a reliable energy source and the creativity to use it. The deep sea, with its vents, seeps, and chemical gradients, provides exactly that. This insight has profound implications for how we think about life beyond Earth. If microbes can thrive in the crushing darkness of Earth's ocean, feeding off sulfur and methane, then perhaps life could emerge on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus, where subsurface oceans may have hydrothermal activity. Chemosynthetic microbes demonstrate that life is not fragile or picky. It is innovative, opportunistic, and determined. Give it a crack in the crust and a few unstable molecules, and life will begin sketching out possibilities. But perhaps the most enchanting thing about these microbes is how quietly they perform their miracles. There is no drama in chemosynthesis, no thrashing or glowing or elaborate displays. It is life reduced to its most fundamental essence, the ability to harvest energy and reshape it into new forms. These microbes do not seek attention, yet they support some of the most vibrant ecosystems in the deep ocean. They turn sulfur into sugar, methane into meals, minerals into survival. They are the chemists of darkness, the silent engines powering worlds that sunlight has abandoned. In a realm defined by cold, pressure, and eternal night, chemosynthetic microbes prove that life does not merely adapt, it invents. As you journey through the deep, there comes a moment when your brain politely taps you on the shoulder and says, that is too big. Perhaps it is a giant isopod, the size of a house cat, scuttling across the sediment like a living armored Roomba. Or maybe it is a colossal squid drifting in the darkness, its tentacles trailing behind it like an unsettling bridal train. Whatever the creature, the message is unmistakable. Somewhere in the ocean's mysterious coding, certain species have unlocked a cheat setting labeled Big Mode, and they are using it with enthusiasm. Deep-sea gigantism is one of the strangest patterns in marine biology. While many surface-dwelling creatures are petite and efficient, their deep-sea relatives sometimes balloon to sizes so enormous they look like props from a movie that blew its entire budget on creature design. Shrimp become Shrimpzilla. jellyfish expand into translucent billboards. Worms stretch into noodles that could feed a mythical giant. It is as though evolution, after centuries of disciplined design, finally reached the deep ocean and thought, what if bigger? But gigantism here is not random extravagance. It is a clever, often necessary response to the deep sea's unique challenges. To understand why size becomes an asset in such a cold, dark, resource-limited environment, you must first appreciate how differently life operates under these conditions. For starters, the deep ocean is cold. Not a mild, refreshing cold, but the kind of cold that convinces molecules to slow dance instead of sprint. Because metabolism slows dramatically in low temperatures, deep-sea organisms burn energy far more slowly. A creature living here could stretch out its caloric budget with the frugality of a monk preserving a single candle for the entire winter. And slow metabolisms often allow for longer lifespans and more time to grow. You can think of deep-sea gigantism partly as the result of creatures aging the way glaciers do, gradually, quietly, and with very few interruptions. Another contributing factor is the high pressure. Though pressure alone does not make animals larger, it creates an environment where slow movement and expansive bodies become favorable. A larger organism can store more energy, survive longer periods of scarce food, and drift more efficiently. When your world offers unpredictable meals and long stretches of nothingness, being big is like carrying a backpack full of snacks, emergency supplies, and the emotional resilience to wait things out. Consider the giant isopod, a distant relative of the pill bug that once rolled across your childhood driveway. In the deep ocean, this humble lineage transforms into something significantly more dramatic. A fully grown giant isopod can stretch up to 0.5 meter long, its armored plates gleaming like it is dressed for an underwater jousting tournament. It ambles across the seafloor with the quiet confidence of a creature that has embraced its size as both shield and pantry. When food is scarce, giant isopods can fast for months, burning through reserves stored in their bulky bodies. Their gigantism is not a fashion statement, it is a survival toolkit. The colossal squid takes this pattern to theatrical extremes. While it remains elusive, because colossal squids are apparently introverts of the highest order, evidence from specimens suggests these animals can reach lengths exceeding 10 meters. Their eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, are the largest in the animal kingdom, capable of detecting faint glimmers in the dark oceanic abyss. This species embodies gigantism as an offensive and defensive strategy. Large eyes maximize the limited light available. Large bodies deter predators and help conserve energy through slow, efficient drifting. And large tentacles. Those are multi-purpose tools for grabbing prey and establishing boundaries that scream, "I am large, please behave accordingly." Even gelatinous creatures get in on the trend. The lion's mane jellyfish, for example, can have tentacles stretching more than 30 meters, long enough to make you reconsider every assumption you have ever made about jellyfish. While not all enormous jellyfish are deep-sea residents, many reach their staggering sizes in colder waters, where metabolic rates decline and lifespans extend. In the deep, jellyfish can swell to sizes that defy common sense, their pulsing bells glowing softly as they drift like living parachutes caught on gentle currents. Another factor encouraging gigantism is limited predation. In shallower waters, predators are everywhere, and being small and swift offers survival advantages. But in the deep sea, predators are fewer, slower, and often energy-conserving. This reduced pressure allows species to grow without immediately being eaten by something larger and hungrier. Ironically, the deep sea's vast emptiness gives giants the space and safety to develop. Gigantism can also enhance feeding opportunities. Large filter feeders can sweep greater volumes of water, capturing more drifting particles and plankton. Large scavengers can dominate a food source when it appears, such as a fallen whale carcass, which becomes a prize buffet, attracting every opportunistic creature for kilometers around. The bigger you are, the more space you take up at the dinner table, and in the deep, that matters. The phenomenon also hints at something profound, that the rules of life are flexible, shaped by environment rather than universal laws. Gigantism is not a random quirk. It is a story of adaptation, a quiet negotiation between organism and habitat. Evolution is not merely adjusting the size bar at whim. It is answering a set of environmental riddles where bigger turns out to be the most efficient solution. Yet despite all these advantages, gigantism also carries risks. Large bodies require time to grow, making organisms vulnerable during their early stages. They need more oxygen, even in a world where oxygen levels can dip to precarious lows. And they often rely on stable environmental conditions. A disruption in deep-sea chemistry or temperature could threaten their existence. Their size, while impressive, is a balancing act as delicate as any fragile equilibrium on the surface. Still, one cannot help but marvel at how boldly nature embraces size in the deep. It is a reminder that the ocean does not shy away from drama. It doubles down, mass-produces it, and sends it drifting through the darkness with tentacles, armor plates, and glowing eyes. Deep-sea gigantism is one of evolution's grand experiments, a celebration of scale in a world where the sun never shines, the cold never fades, and survival depends on making the most of a place that defies every expectation. If you've ever floated on the surface of the ocean, you know it has a soundtrack. Waves breaking, gulls complaining about everything, boats humming in the distance. But the deeper you descend, the more that soundtrack dissolves until suddenly the world sounds like it has been placed under a glass dome. The deep ocean is not silent in the way a library is silent. It is silent in the way outer space might be, if outer space were filled with water and occasionally whispered to you through the voice of a passing whale. This deep quiet is not accidental. Near the surface, waves churn, storms rumble, and human activities send vibrations through the water. Sound scatters chaotically, bouncing off shifting surfaces. But as you sink away from all that motion, the water becomes denser, more uniform, and astonishingly good at letting sound move in smooth, uninterrupted lines. Down here, sound does not just travel, it goes on a journey. In fact, sound travels faster and farther in seawater than in air, thanks to water's density. A soft noise underwater would outrun its equivalent in air by a wide margin. If sound had legs, it would be training for marathons down here. But the real magic lies in how deep water forms something known as the SOFAR channel, a sort of natural sound highway. At a certain depth, where temperature and pressure combine just right, sound waves become trapped and can travel for hundreds, even thousands, of miles with almost no loss of energy. It is the ocean's version of perfect cell service, except instead of downloading videos faster, it lets whale calls wander across basins as though they're trying to reach an audience several zones away. Many deep-diving whales, blue whales, fin whales, and other masters of the abyss take full advantage of this layer. Their calls are long, low-frequency notes that vibrate through the water like slow-motion thunder. These notes are not merely songs, they are broadcasts. A blue whale's call can travel so far that it might reach individuals beyond the horizon of an entire continent. Somewhere in the dark, two whales separated by hundreds of miles may be having what amounts to a long-distance conversation, their voices gliding effortlessly through the quiet like travelers on a well-paved road. But the deep ocean's quietness is more than just an acoustic convenience. It shapes behavior and survival. Animals here rely heavily on sound for navigation, orientation, and sensing distant disturbances. When light is a myth and sight is a luxury, sound becomes the primary medium for understanding one's surroundings. Some species send out clicks, snaps, or pulses to gauge distances, primitive but effective versions of sonar. These sounds spread into the quiet like ripples in a calm lake, returning echoes that reveal obstacles, prey, or the faint outlines of nearby terrain. The deep sea's quiet also creates a kind of emotional atmosphere, an unbroken calm that feels ancient and introspective. Even mechanical clinks or scratches from submersibles sound startlingly crisp, as if the water is amplifying them out of curiosity. A simple metal tap that would be forgettable on land becomes a bold announcement in the deep, echoing into the dark with embarrassing enthusiasm. It is the auditory equivalent of shouting in a cathedral when you only meant to clear your throat. Yet despite this stillness, the ocean is far from empty. It is full of subtle sounds, many of them so faint you only notice them when you listen with the careful attention normally reserved for secret conversations behind a closed door. Geological activity produces distant rumbles. Shifting sediments create gentle cascades. Tiny organisms generate microscopic snaps and crackles, forming a constant but almost imperceptible background fizz. It is white noise for the deep-dwelling soul. Human ears, however, are not well adapted for hearing in water. But for animals evolved for this realm, sound is an exquisitely detailed medium. To a sperm whale, the ocean might seem full of sonic architecture, layers of echoes revealing everything from ridges on the seafloor to the density of a distant shoal of fish. For a deep-sea fish with fine-tuned lateral lines, vibrations might paint a picture of water movement, allowing it to sense approaching predators before they ever come into view. Sound is not merely a message here, it is a map. Interestingly, the quiet of the deep can magnify certain sounds in ways that make them feel almost surreal. A whale call arriving from miles away might sound gentle, but it carries the emotional weight of something vast and alive drifting through darkness. The deep amplifies the loneliness and grandeur of these voices. They echo not because they bounce repeatedly, but because they persist, traveling patiently, unaffected by time or distance, until eventually they fade into the background hum that makes the ocean feel like it is dreaming. This capacity for long-distance sound travel has also made the deep ocean invaluable to human researchers. For decades, scientists have used the SOFAR channel to track whales, monitor seismic events, and even send acoustic messages over extraordinary distances. The ocean, unintentionally polite, lends its quietest depths to help us listen to far-off phenomena. It is Earth's most discreet messenger service, but with this advantage comes vulnerability. As human noise increases, from shipping, drilling, and military sonar, the deep's natural quiet is disrupted. A sound that once traveled peacefully may now compete with the low roar of engines or the sharp ping of sonar pulses. For animals that rely on sound for survival, these intrusions are not just annoying, they are confusing, stressful, and sometimes harmful. The deep ocean's quiet, once a stable and ancient refuge, is now something that must be protected. Still, in many regions, the deep remains a realm where sound behaves with elegance, where a single call can traverse an entire underwater kingdom, and where silence is not emptiness, but an invitation for the rare voices that pass through it. Down here, in the calm between pressure and darkness, sound becomes something beautiful, a thread connecting distant lives, a guide through a world without light, and a reminder that even in the quietest places, communication never truly stops. Descending into the Hadal zone feels less like visiting another part of Earth, and more like trespassing into a realm that was never meant for human eyes. These trenches, named after Hades, in a moment of scientific honesty rare for naming conventions, plunge more than 6,000 meters down, slicing into the planet's crust like vast, deliberate wounds. They are so deep that if you picked up Mount Everest, gave it a gentle flip, and set it inside the Mariana Trench, the summit would still be underwater. The Hadal depths are not simply deep, they are absurdly, unapologetically deep, and they wear that depth like a cloak of indifference toward anything happening above. As you sink into one of these trenches, the surrounding water darkens from black to something even deeper. If black is a color, Hadal darkness is a geography. Light from your vessel illuminates only a tiny cone ahead, revealing the steep, plunging walls that descend beside you like the sides of an underwater canyon, carved by a colossal invisible hand. The walls are jagged in places, smooth in others, with layers of sediment and rock stacked like the pages of an ancient book written in geological shorthand. The pressure down here is so immense that describing it in numbers fails to convey its true strangeness. Instead, imagine the weight of 100 elephants standing on your thumbnail. Now imagine that weight increasing with every meter you descend. And finally, picture life not only tolerating that pressure but thriving, moving with calm, unhurried grace along the trench floor, as if this crushing force were nothing more than atmospheric ambience. Trenches are formed where tectonic plates collide, one sliding beneath another in a process known as subduction. This slow-motion collision creates long, deep, narrow depressions that stretch across ocean basins like carved scars. The Mariana Trench, for example, arcs across the western Pacific for more than 2,000 kilometers, a geological furrow so dramatic it might as well come with a warning sign reading, "Do not attempt casual exploration." But trenches exist in every ocean, each shaped by millions of years of tectonic arguments that ended with one plate reluctantly folding beneath another. Despite their intimidating nature, these trenches are far from empty. They host their own distinct ecosystems, small, specialized communities that survive in conditions resembling an alien planet more than Earth as we know it. The Hadal fauna consist of creatures that are not merely tolerant of extremes, they are tailored to them. Take the Hadal snailfish, a surprisingly delicate-looking species that holds the depth record for any known fish. It glides through the water with soft, translucent fins, its body tuned to withstand pressures that would turn most surface creatures into abstract biological art. Rather than being massive or armored, the snailfish is small, flexible, and built like a whisper, proof that sometimes the best strategy in an unforgiving world is not brute force, but elegant adaptation. Other trench residents include amphipods, tiny crustaceans that reach impressive sizes compared to their surface relatives. These creatures swarm around organic material that drifts down from above, breaking it down with an energy that seems almost cheerful, considering the circumstances. Some trenches have small fields of microbial mats coating rocks or sediments, thriving on chemical gradients produced by the slow burial and heating of organic material. These microbes live lives of molecular focus, performing chemical transformations that quietly sustain the animals around them. The terrain of the trench floor is not a smooth valley, but a rugged, unpredictable landscape. Some areas are littered with boulders that tumbled down from the trench walls during ancient underwater landslides. Other sections are covered with fine silt, so light and fluffy that even the gentlest passing current leaves swirling clouds suspended in the water. The trenches also occasionally host faults or fissures, where the Earth's crust is pulling or grinding, creating microhabitats for life that can exploit faint chemical signals rising from below. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of these depths is the sense of geological isolation. The trench ecosystems are not extensions of the surrounding deep sea so much as they are enclaves, biological cul-de-sacs where evolution has carved out specializations unique to these extreme conditions. The species found at the bottom of one trench might never encounter or resemble those in another trench halfway across the world. The Hadal Zone is not one environment. It is dozens of separate worlds stitched together by the idea of depth. For humans, exploring these trenches is an exercise in humility. The technology required to reach full ocean depth is extraordinarily complex. Submersibles must withstand pressures that would casually flatten steel. Electronics must be shielded, hulls thickened, and every component tested repeatedly, because in the Hadal Zone, failure is not an inconvenience, it is fatal. Very few people have visited these depths in person, and even robotic explorers operate cautiously, aware that a small malfunction could end an entire mission. And yet, despite our limited access, the Hadal Zone offers insights into some of Earth's deepest mysteries. Studying trench organisms helps us understand how life adapts to extremes. Examining sediments reveals histories of earthquakes, tsunamis, and shifting continents. Sampling water chemistry sheds light on how materials cycle through the crust. Every new discovery from these depths nudges humanity's understanding of the planet in directions we did not anticipate. The Hadal trenches are not just deep, they are profound. They are places where Earth hides its geological blueprints and biological surprises, places too vast and too stubborn to care whether humans ever comprehend them fully. They stretch into the crust like forgotten chapters of planetary history, waiting to be read by those willing to descend into the quietest, most secretive places on Earth. Down here, human curiosity meets its match, not because the trenches are hostile, but because they are indifferent. They existed long before we did, and they will remain long after. And as you hover near the trench floor, with darkness pressing from every direction and the walls rising impossibly high around you, one thing becomes certain. The Hadal zone does not ignore human curiosity out of malice. It simply never needed to acknowledge us in the first place. Exploring the deep ocean is a little like trying to inspect the basement of a house the size of a planet, while armed with nothing but curiosity, engineering degrees, and a persistent belief that darkness cannot possibly hide that many surprises. Humans, unsurprisingly, are not built for depths where pressure behaves like a cosmic hydraulic press. Darkness is absolute, and temperatures hover just above the point where water would develop personality flaws. So we send our quietest companions instead. Deep-sea robots, machines constructed with such solemn purpose that they resemble introverts who have finally discovered an environment where no one will ask them to socialize. These robots come in two primary categories: remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, each with its own personality quirks. An ROV is essentially a mechanical deep-sea marionette. It stays tethered to a ship by a thick cable that supplies power and allows pilots topside to maneuver it with precision. The arrangement is not unlike controlling a very expensive puppet, except the puppet weighs several tons, carries scientific equipment, and must politely resist being pulverized by pressure. Its cable, a lifeline of fiber optics and strength, stretches down through the water column, connecting ship and robot like a long, glowing umbilical cord. AUVs, on the other hand, operate with full independence. No cable, no constant supervision, just a plan uploaded into their memory and a gentle mechanical nudge as they depart. They glide through the depths on pre-programmed missions, mapping seafloors, measuring chemical gradients, and collecting data with the stoic professionalism of a machine that thrives on solitude. If ROVs are controlled extroverts working under direct human guidance, AUVs are the quiet wanderers of the abyss, roaming alone for hours or days before surfacing to report their findings as if returning from a meditative retreat. The engineering required to build deep-sea robots is staggering. Each machine must withstand pressure so intense it could crush ordinary materials like empty soda cans caught under a hydraulic press. Engineers combat this challenge by crafting pressure-resistant spheres from titanium, ceramics, or syntactic foam, a material so buoyant and durable it behaves as if it skipped physics class entirely. Electrical components nestle inside these reinforced shells, carefully insulated so that deep sea pressure cannot sneak in and wreak havoc with circuit boards. Cameras and lights line the exterior, giving the robots the ability to see in darkness so complete that even imagination struggles. Lights are especially important, but they must be designed with finesse. Shine a bright beam in the deep and you reveal particles. Endless, swirling particles. The deep sea is full of them, drifting like the universe's slowest snowstorm. So engineers mount lights at strategic angles, preventing the machine from blinding itself with illuminated marine dust. The result is visibility good enough to identify organisms, geological features, and the occasional confused fish that swims up to inspect its unusual metallic visitor. ROVs come equipped with manipulator arms, robotic limbs with claws or grippers designed for collecting samples. Watching an operator use these arms is like watching someone play a high-stakes crane game, except instead of plush toys, the prizes are rare biological specimens, mineral fragments or fragile sediments that crumble at a stern glance. Piloting these arms can require years of practice. It is delicate, frustrating work, and the ocean often responds with currents that nudge the robot around like an overexcited toddler. Yet ROV pilots persist, maneuvering the arms with surgeon-like precision as they pluck samples from hydrothermal chimneys, trench floors, or drifting gelatinous creatures that seem to evaporate if handled too abruptly. Navigation is another challenge. GPS signals do not reach underwater. Water simply refuses to cooperate with radio waves, so deep-sea robots rely on sonar, acoustic beacons, and inertial navigation systems. They ping the surroundings, listen to the echoes, and build mental maps of their environment. It is echolocation on an industrial scale. AUVs often trace sweeping paths across the sea floor, gathering data layer by layer, until a geological portrait emerges from the murk. ROVs, meanwhile, hover and drift, moving slowly as cameras record the landscape in real time, while scientists on the ship shout excitedly each time something odd enters the frame. The collaboration between humans and these robots forms one of the strangest partnerships in science. Teams of researchers crowd around monitors in dimly lit control rooms, sipping coffee at unholy hours as they watch live video feeds of the seafloor. They analyze strange shapes, debate the identity of drifting creatures, and occasionally argue over whether a feature in the sediment is a new species, a rock, or simply a trick of the lighting. When the robot discovers something spectacular, an unfamiliar organism, a mineral-encrusted chimney, or an unexpected geological formation, the room erupts in cheerful chaos, as though a distant cousin just sent news of a delightful surprise. These robots are, of course, not fearless explorers. They are tools, extraordinary tools, but tools nonetheless. They endure depths not because they are brave, but because we built them with the stubborn determination that humans save for problems too fascinating to ignore. In a sense, they are the avatars we send into the deep, immersing themselves in conditions we cannot experience directly. Their quiet perseverance reflects our curiosity, our engineering creativity, and our enduring belief that understanding the deep sea is worth the effort. And while they may look bold, trailing lights and cameras through the abyss like futuristic creatures, their personalities, if machines can be said to have personalities, are the epitome of introversion. They avoid the sun, seek solitude, and spend their working lives wandering spaces where no one will bother them. In return, they bring back stories and footage from a world that would otherwise remain silent and unseen. Through these mechanical emissaries, humanity extends its senses into the planet's hidden depths. And as each mission reveals more about this vast, mysterious frontier, we are reminded that exploration is not always about footprints or flags. Sometimes it is about a quiet robot drifting through darkness, illuminating secrets one gentle glow of its lights at a time. If the deep ocean could talk, it might reasonably claim, "I mind my own business." After all, it sits beneath kilometers of water, wrapped in darkness, far removed from bustling cities, wildfire smoke, deforested landscapes, and the daily drama of the surface world. It is the planet's introverted hemisphere, quiet, cold, slow-moving, and apparently uninterested in whatever humans are quarreling about this century. But climate change, persistent and thorough as an overly determined houseguest, finds its way into even the most remote corners of the planet, including the Hadal trenches and abyssal plains that otherwise seem immune to commotion. Down here, isolation is not protection. The deep ocean may not watch the news, but the consequences of surface decisions still arrive like unwanted postcards. The first and perhaps most subtle effect of climate change on the deep ocean is warming. Even a fraction of a degree increase in temperature might seem trivial to surface dwellers who routinely debate thermostat settings. But the deep sea is a realm where conditions hardly shift over thousands of years. Stability here is not just a preference, It is the foundation of biological and chemical processes evolved across geological time. When warmer surface waters absorb excess heat from the atmosphere, they slowly circulate downward through massive oceanic conveyor belts. This mixing eventually delivers warmth to depths that have long existed just above freezing. To organisms here, that tiny increase is like someone quietly changing the background rules of existence. Warmer deep waters influence oxygen levels as well. Cold water holds more dissolved oxygen, and the deep is traditionally oxygen-rich enough to support a slow, steady pace of life. As temperatures rise, oxygen solubility decreases, and thus deep regions face gradual deoxygenation, a polite-sounding word for breathing becomes more difficult. Many animals in the deep operate with metabolisms set to ultra-efficient, low-oxygen conditions already. Any further reduction can stress them in ways scientists are only beginning to understand. Imagine being told your already small supply of oxygen was being cut just a bit more, permanently. It is a change without drama, but with profound consequences. Climate change also alters the amount and type of organic matter reaching the deep. Most deep-sea creatures rely on marine snow, a gentle rain of organic particles drifting down from above. This snow is composed of tiny remains, discarded cells, fragments of plankton, and the occasional larger piece of debris. Climate-driven shifts in surface ecosystems, such as decreasing plankton populations or altered nutrient cycles, change both the quantity and quality of this material. In some regions, marine snow becomes sparse, starving deep-sea communities. In others, it becomes more sporadic or arrives in pulses that disrupt established feeding patterns. It is as though the cosmic vending machine of the deep has suddenly been placed on an unpredictable timer. The chemistry of the deep sea is shifting too. Rising atmospheric carbon dioxide dissolves into seawater, triggering acidification. While acidification begins at the surface, ocean currents transport these lower pH waters to the deep over time. Many organisms rely on calcium carbonate to form shells or internal structures. In more acidic water, this mineral dissolves more readily, gradually eroding the stability of those structures. The process does not resemble the dramatic collapse of a building. It is more like the long, slow fading of ink on a page. Skeletons thin, shells soften. Certain species lose their ability to form protective barriers at all. Deep-sea corals, ancient, slow-growing organisms that build reefs in total darkness, become increasingly vulnerable as their skeletons struggle to maintain density. These reefs, built over centuries or millennia, can weaken in mere decades. Climate change also influences deep-sea circulation. The planet's conveyor belt-like currents rely on predictable differences in temperature and salinity. As melting ice and warming surface waters alter these variables, the great oceanic engine risks stalling or slowing. Any shift in these currents affects how nutrients, heat, oxygen, and carbon move around the planet. For the deep, which depends on these flows like veins carrying lifeblood, disruptions can reorganize ecosystems entirely. Entire regions may become less habitable, while others might receive unexpected surges of nutrients or warmth. These cascading effects are slow-motion rearrangements, ecosystem remodeling that does not ask permission and does not leave blueprints. Even geological processes in the deep may respond to climate change. As ice on land melts, the planet redistributes mass. This shifts pressure on the crust, subtly altering tectonic stresses. Some scientists speculate this could influence fault activity, underwater landslides, or methane release from deep sediment reserves. Such events might sound esoteric, but they can send ripples, literal and figurative, through the deep sea, reshaping habitats and releasing new chemical inputs into the water column. Meanwhile, species migrations are beginning to show surprising patterns. Creatures traditionally confined to mid-water depths follow shifting temperature zones downward, entering ecosystems already finely tuned to scarcity. Competition increases, new predators appear, species that evolved for slow, predictable interactions now face intruders with different metabolisms and behaviors. The deep sea, once a sanctuary of stability, becomes a more dynamic and sometimes more hazardous place. Perhaps the most haunting impact is the time lag. Changes happening today on the surface may take decades or centuries to reach the deep in full force. By the time the deepest waters feel the brunt of climate change, the processes that caused it may have grown or shifted, making the deep's response a trailing echo of past decisions. The deep sea is like a library that receives overdue announcements long after the events they describe, reacting to messages from a surface world that has already moved on to its next phase. Yet even as climate change infiltrates this shadowed realm, the deep remains resilient in ways that defy easy narratives. Life here has adapted to extremes for millions of years: cold, pressure, darkness, scarcity. While climate change introduces new stresses, the organisms of the deep may surprise us. Some will suffer, some will vanish, but others may shift their ranges, alter their behaviors, or reconfigure their chemical strategies in ways we have yet to imagine. What the deep truly teaches us is perspective. There is no away on a planet where water connects everything. No region is so remote, so quiet, or so hidden that it escapes the influence of global change. The deep sea does not sit outside the story of Earth. It is a chapter we are only beginning to understand, and one whose fate is tied to ours, whether we ever visit its trenches or not. If the deep ocean is Earth's basement, then it is the kind of basement where a single flickering bulb reveals dusty shapes that may or may not be lawn equipment. Something scuttles in the dark a little too quickly, and you decide, with great maturity, to back away slowly and pretend you never needed whatever you came for. For all the science, sonar maps, cameras, and heroic robotic expeditions we've thrown at it, the deep sea remains fundamentally, defiantly mysterious. Not mysterious in a poetic, ooh, wonder sense. Mysterious in a, did something just move, or is my imagination trying to unionize? Sense. It is the part of the planet where the unknown does not merely exist, it thrives. Take, for example, the strange sounds recorded in the deep ocean. Sounds with names that feel equal parts scientific and whimsical. The bloop, the upsweep, the train, the whistle, the slow down. These noises, captured by hydrophones meant to eavesdrop on the ocean's acoustic world, have puzzled researchers for decades. Some, like the bloop, were so powerful they resonated across entire monitoring networks, hinting at something massive moving or vocalizing far below. While many of these sounds have since been attributed to natural processes like ice quakes or shifting underwater terrain, their initial discovery sparked delicious speculation. Was it a gigantic creature, a geological tantrum, a submarine with indigestion? The fact that such speculation felt plausible highlights how little we truly grasp about the deep. Even with modern imaging technology, strange shapes sometimes drift across camera feeds, shadows that refuse to resolve into predictable forms. A large, indistinct outline glides past the lens, and scientists collectively hold their breath. Is it a new species, a known creature unusually close to the lens, a plastic bag that evolution has pranked us with? Sometimes the shadow never returns. Sometimes it flashes by so quickly that its identity stays imprisoned in a freeze frame, destined to be analyzed, hypothesized about, and eventually filed into the quiet purgatory of oceanic mysteries. The deep is too vast, its visibility too limited, for certainty to always be an option. Then there are the species we've encountered exactly once, fleeting creatures that appeared before a submersible, or ROV, swirled briefly like apparitions, and then disappeared forever. These single-sighting species form a category of deep-sea folklore, supported by high-resolution footage and stunned commentary from researchers. A gelatinous organism with threads like drifting glass. A fish with body proportions that would cause physics teachers emotional distress. A cephalopod that looked like a balloon animal sculpted by a surrealist. These animals don't reappear on later expeditions, leaving us to wonder, Were they rare? Were they curious? Or were they simply passing through from some other hidden corridor of the deep? The deep ocean also has a habit of generating structures that look eerily intentional. Geometric patterns etched into sediment, perfectly spaced holes dotting the seafloor, arrangements of rocks that appear assembled by someone or something with a sense of style. Each time these formations are discovered, speculation flares. Are they feeding traces? Burrows? Natural currents carving shapes that imitate order? In most cases, nature eventually offers an explanation, though sometimes only after years of debate. The deep is a patient sculptor. It's humans who get antsy. But mysteries aren't limited to things we see. They include things we don't see, but know must be there. The deep ocean is estimated to contain millions of undiscovered species. Millions. Even with our increasing use of cutting-edge technology, the percentage of the deep that has been visually explored is so tiny that it might as well be a rounding error. Imagine entering a mansion with 10,000 rooms and insisting you've seen the whole place after peeking into the pantry. That is essentially humanity's relationship with the deep. This ignorance doesn't stem from lack of effort. Scientists deploy submersibles, nets, sensors, and autonomous explorers with the determination of people who refuse to let darkness win. And yet the deep keeps its secrets with admirable commitment. Creatures escape nets designed specifically to catch them. Cameras malfunction at key moments. Weather turns expeditions back. Batteries die just as something interesting glides into view. Even the robots engineered for stoicism occasionally behave as though the deep is making them nervous. Perhaps the most tantalizing mysteries are the life forms we suspect exist but have never observed. Microbes adapted to high-pressure chemical gradients in trenches we haven't sampled yet. Midwater predators that evade detection through speed, translucence, or uncanny timing. Immense gelatinous organisms that disintegrate on contact with sampling instruments, leaving only faint clues behind, like a signature that evaporates before you can read it. Entire taxonomic groups could be waiting in the deep, quietly existing beyond the reach of our imperfect tools. And then there are mysteries of scale. Vast underwater lakes of brine, shimmering like portals. Towering coral forests built in total darkness. Currents inside trenches that behave like wandering rivers. Even the seabed itself seems to keep secrets. Some areas produce rare minerals, whose formation processes are not fully understood. Others release gases through tiny fissures that hint at geological activity more dynamic than expected. The planet's basement is full of puzzles, some geological, some biological, all intriguing. The real challenge is that every expedition uncovers new questions faster than it answers old ones. The deep is not a filled-in map. It is a constantly expanding question mark. Each time a robot brings back a sample or video clip, a new chapter of curiosity opens. A species no one has ever documented before sparks debates. Is it common? Is it ancient? Is it the only one of its kind? Has it been here for millions of years, simply overlooked? In the end, the deep sea is mysterious, not because it wants to be, but because it can be. Its vastness, darkness, and pressure create a perfect environment for secrets to thrive. It is the only place on Earth where a species might exist for eons without ever intersecting with humanity, not out of malice, but out of sheer spatial indifference. And perhaps that is why the deep ocean feels like the universe's basement. It is where the planet stores its forgotten blueprints, its experimental creatures, its unexplained noises, and its ongoing stories. It is a place where shadows hold promise, where sounds carry riddles, and where every strange, fleeting glimpse reminds us that Earth is still wild enough to surprise us, especially where we least expect it. By the time you've traveled through the deepest reaches of the ocean, past the sunlit shallows, into the dimming twilight, beyond the midnight hush, through the pressure-crushed plains, and into trenches where even imagination hesitates, you begin to sense something profound threading through the darkness. It is not fear, although the deep certainly has teeth sharp enough and shadows strange enough to earn it. It is not loneliness, though silence here is thick enough to feel like a presence. What permeates the deep is something quieter and far more startling: resilience, a stubborn, extraordinary persistence of life that thrives in places where, by all reasonable logic, life should have thrown up its hands ages ago. Darkness, which to us feels like an ending, is here simply a medium. Life shapes itself around it with ease. Where our eyes fail, deep-sea creatures invent new strategies: glow organs, upward-pointing retinas, or no eyes at all, having dismissed visual perception as an unnecessary luxury. Sound, heat, and chemistry become their tools for interpreting the world. The world does not become less knowable without light, it simply becomes differently knowable. Silence, too, is transformed. At the surface, silence often implies emptiness or retreat. Here, it is the operating backdrop for communication, hunting, movement, and safety. It is the reason whale calls travel beyond the curve of the earth. It is the canvas against which faint vibrations paint maps for creatures navigating the void. Silence here is not absence, it is structure. And pressure, immeasurable, crushing, absolute, becomes merely another environmental feature to adapt to. The deep sea asks everything of its inhabitants, yet life responds with bodies that bend rather than break. Bones lighten, muscles soften, enzymes restructure themselves into pressure-tolerant variations. Entire anatomies reinvent the definition of possible, proving that even the planet's most extreme architecture cannot erase the instinct to survive. If Earth has a realm that demonstrates life's capacity for innovation, it is the deep ocean. Every creature, from ghostly gelatinous drifters to imposing trench predators, represents a solution to a problem humans never had to consider. How do you find food where nutrients are scarce? How do you navigate where sight is useless? How do you persist where temperature hovers just above freezing and pressure could flatten steel? The answers are written in glowing skin, in transparent flesh, in jaws shaped for efficiency rather than aesthetics, in sensory systems attuned to whispers rather than shouts. Each adaptation is an ode to persistence. And through all of this, through the miles upon miles of darkness and quiet that stretch beneath our continents and across our seas, what becomes clear is how little we truly understand our own planet. We often speak about space as the final frontier, gazing upward with a blend of hope and existential dread. But beneath our very feet lies a frontier just as mysterious, one we've barely scratched. More people have walked on the moon than have visited the deepest ocean trench. Our maps of Mars are more complete than our maps of the seafloor. For all our satellites and sensors, the deep remains a largely invisible world. Yet, in its invisibility, it exerts influence. It regulates climate by storing heat and carbon. It nurtures ecosystems that sustain surface life. It recycles nutrients, sculpts continents, and cushions the planet with a hydrological engine older than any terrestrial species. The deep is not an isolated underworld. It is a beating, shifting organ in Earth's global physiology, a system so complex that our understanding of it resembles notes from a first lesson rather than conclusions from a long-term study. What we have learned so far is humbling. The deep sea, far from being barren, thrives on ingenuity. It takes the three elements we often associate with absence, darkness, silence, and cold, and turns them into conditions ripe for creativity. Life here does not merely persist, it expresses itself with unexpected flair. Some organisms glow, some expand to colossal proportions, some distill energy from chemicals so harsh they would wreck most surface biology. Some drift with elegance that makes gravity seem negotiable. Some wait in near motionless patience for rare meals, embodying rhythms shaped not by seasons, but by geological time. Every revelation from the deep, each new species, each unexplained sound, Each glimpse of a creature so unusual it borders on imaginative fiction adds to the sense that our planet still holds secrets worthy of awe. Secrets not tucked away in distant galaxies or speculative dimensions, but right here, beneath us, in folds of ocean that stretch farther and deeper than any mountain chain extends upward. And perhaps that is the true gift of exploring the deep. It reminds us that mystery is not something we must travel light years to find. It is something Earth still offers generously, as if encouraging us to keep asking questions, to stay curious, to remain humble. The deep ocean whispers, in its quiet way, that wonder is not limited to starlight. It thrives just as richly in cold salt water, in bioluminescent flickers, in trenches carved by ancient tectonic arguments. As you rise back toward the surface, toward warmth, toward light, toward the familiar, you carry with you not only images of strange creatures and forgotten landscapes, but an understanding that Earth is far wilder, deeper, and more surprising than we tend to imagine. The ocean's darkest zones remind us that our planet is still writing its story, chapter by submerged chapter, in languages we are only beginning to decipher. And if there is one truth the deep insists on, it is this: we do not yet know our home, but oh, how extraordinary it feels to try.